All right, the last of the texture techniques are bonus techniques because you have to go on a little bit of a hunt for a couple of things at your house. So thing number one is find a color crayon. Doesn't have to be white, it could be any color. I'm going to use white, and I'm going to tell you why I'll use white in a minute. So there's thing one. Thing two is some salt. So this is just regular, like, kosher salt from the kitchen. So salt, a color crayon, salt. If you happen to have rubbing alcohol, I will show you something with rubbing alcohol. And you can try as many of these bonus things as you have the supplies for, okay? It's bonus. You don't have to try it, but they do make some really cool effects. And the last thing is texture. Like, you can use watercolor to stamp. So if you happen to have stamps at home, if you can find bubble wrap, I like this stuff. I'm not really sure what it's from, but I do enjoy it. Or bottle caps work really well. So random junk for stamping, okay? So remember, these are bonus techniques. Try as many as you have the stuff for. So we're gonna start with the color crayon. White color crayon is super useful. If you remember when I talked about watercolor, we don't have white watercolor. So not having white watercolor, what that means to us when we're making a painting is that we have no white paint. If I want a section of my painting to stay white or be white, I have to preserve that white paper. So having a white color crayon can give you a way to preserve white paper or white space on a sheet of paper. This technique works with any color of color crayon, obviously. Maybe in elementary school you did this. But what I'm gonna do here is I'm just going to, you do have to press pretty hard, and it's, oh, let's see, I'm pressing hard enough that I just broke my color crayon. And it's a little tricky to see because white color crayon, white paper, right? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna paint over this section. With just a flat wash. So I've just picked up one of the paint colors that I was using in my mission to clean off my paint tray today. And I'm just gonna go over the top. And you can see all of those stripes that I drew with my color crayon are right there. The paint doesn't stick to the wax. So it can be a sneaky way to keep a white section of your painting. So that's called crayon resist or wax resist. So if you have a crayon, go ahead and give that a try. The next one we're gonna do is with the salt. So have your salt handy. I'm gonna do another wet into wet color mix. Wet into wet color mix. So I'm gonna start with this blue keeps changing depending on what part of the puddle I grab from. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint about partway across my square. I'm gonna give it a little bit of water here. And now I need another color. Oh, it's sort of a hideous color. We'll make it work. And I'm gonna paint so that they mix into each other, right? I'm going to do the wet into wet color mixing thing. I'm gonna let them blend together. Of course, because I use blue and orange, I'm going to make kind of a brownish gray. It's not the most beautiful, but it works. We need ugly colors too to make paintings happen, so it's good for us to embrace those ugly colors. And now what I'm gonna do, right into my wet into wet mix, is I'm gonna sprinkle just a little bit of salt. So you can see a couple of salts going on. You can see them mostly in the blue. So what happens, and you don't want to completely cover it with salt. Think of like stars in the sky. If you have stars everywhere, the sky's all white. So you can see that I've got little sprinkle of the salt. What happens is the salt is a desiccant. It absorbs the water, and the water gets absorbed by the salt, and the pigment will pool there. And what ends up happening is tomorrow, when it's dry, I can take the salt off, and I will end up with some little crystalline patterns in my paint. Next, I'm gonna use my alcohol. I have a little container here that I'm gonna pour it into so I don't use the whole bottle. So I have my little container. This is just rubbing alcohol like from your first aid kit. If you don't have this, don't worry about it. If you do have it, go ahead and give it a try. And then I'm just gonna, this is like a skewer. You need something that's not your paintbrush to dip in the alcohol. So I'm just getting ready for that time. Mission to clean my palette off continues, which means I'm going to be working with kind of a murky gray. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this section flat wash, so just one color. And here's what the alcohol does. The alcohol does a similar thing to the salt in that it pushes the paint out of the way. So I'm going to take this little stick, I'm going to dip it in the alcohol, and now I'm going to drip it on my paint. And you can see that the alcohol is just going to push the paint out of the way in just a really unusual fashion. So you can splatter it on, you can put it on in particular little dots, but it's a little like the surface of the moon. And you can do that into a wet and wet mix or dry mix, whatever. If you don't have alcohol, no problems. Don't give that one a try, but it is kind of a fun effect. Last one, all this weird stuff, right? Watercolor can be used to stamp. So what I'm gonna do is grab paint, and I'm using kind of a dry brush technique so that I have more paint and less water. So there's my painty spot, and I'm just gonna gently push this down onto my surface, and I get bubbles because this is bubble wrap. I can do the same kind of thing with this like meshy sort of stuff that I found that I really think is fun to use. And you can see I'm just painting on the surface of this, and now I'm going to flip it over and push it into or onto my paint surface, and I get kind of this grid sort of thing. You can do the same kind of thing with a bottle cap. You can paint just with the paint on here. Like I said, it can't be too wet or it doesn't work. And then see what kind of impression that makes. Ooh, that makes circles. That's fun. You can also do the same thing with an actual stamp. So if you have any actual stamps at your house, you can paint on the surface with the watercolor. Again, it can't be too watery or it just leaks everywhere. And then you can go ahead and push it down and it will stamp. So that's kind of another fun technique. So go ahead and try those bonus techniques if you have the supplies for them.